My name is Cheryl, and at the beginning of last year, I ate too much fancy food and gained 5 kilograms. Now I'm 49 years old and trying to lose weight before the holidays. My plan is to lose 5 kilograms now so that if I gain it back during the holiday season, it won't be a big deal, right? You must be kidding, there's so much delicious food from Christmas to New Year's. It's a happy problem to have. I'll probably end up buying myself Valentine's chocolates too. Oops, I'm already drooling. Looks like I'm going to gain weight again this year. Oh well. Today, I have a story from winter that I'd like to share with you. It's about something that happened when I was 28 years old. After dating for several years, my boyfriend Paul and I got engaged, and I introduced him to my parents. This was the so-called marriage greeting. My parents liked Paul, and everything was supposed to go smoothly. But then my older sister Laura, who is 3 years older than me, came home from work and there was an issue. She became fixated on Paul. It's strange, but when you're sisters, you can sense each other's feelings. I could tell right away that she had fallen in love with Paul the moment she saw him. I hoped it was just a fleeting crush, but when she shook his hand, she blushed and held on a little too long. Even when she talked to him, there was this dreamy look in her eyes. I didn't think it was right for her to act like that toward my fiancé, but maybe she didn't even realize she was doing it. Emotions can be hard to control, so I decided to pretend I didn't notice, hoping my sister wouldn't act on her feelings. However, after Paul left, my sister, fresh out of the bath and still wrapped in a towel, confronted me. "You should call off the engagement," she said. According to her, Paul was a womanizer, and I could find someone better. She kept criticizing him, but she didn't have any real reason for saying that. "Why do you think he's a player?" I asked her. "It's a woman's intuition," she replied. The thing is, my sister has never had a boyfriend, so how could I trust her woman's intuition when she has no experience with men? I decided I should trust Paul, whose character I've known for years. I casually brushed off my sister's advice, saying, "Yeah, I'll be careful," without taking it too seriously. After that, Paul started visiting our home often. He said he wanted to build a good relationship with my family, so I invited him over, feeling comfortable about it. My parents were happy, and I hoped Paul would get along well with them since he was going to be my husband. But while things should have been going smoothly, my sister had other ideas. She tried to get close to Paul in a different way. According to Paul, when I wasn't around, she would grab his arm, press her chest against him, and ask, "Don't you think Marianne is a bit immature?" She even asked for his contact details and once purposely fell down in a way that exposed her underwear. Paul said it was so over the top that it was actually funny, but I would have been worried if he was the kind of man to take it seriously. My sister believed she had a chance because Paul couldn't directly reject her since she was my sister. Every time they met, she would approach him with a sweet voice, saying, "Hey." It started with her falling in love at first sight, but it didn't help that Paul worked for a big company, which made him even more appealing to her. She told me, "He's reliable, has a face I like, and seems like the kind of man who can provide security for the future." She was completely taken by him. My parents saw all of this happening, but said nothing. In fact, it wasn't unusual for them to stay quiet when it came to my sister's actions. Honestly, she's always been the type who struggles with things. For example, if she's asked to warm up food, she might accidentally use a plastic dish that isn't heat-resistant, and it melts. She wasn't good at studying, either, or at sports. She often skipped swimming class by making excuses like hurting her foot, feeling unwell, or having skin problems. She wasn't great at schoolwork, sports, or even household chores. And to be honest, she's not particularly good-looking either. Still, because she's the eldest daughter, my parents always treated her differently, giving her special treatment. They even quietly pushed the responsibility of supporting her onto me. I was constantly told to make sure she stood out, but without drawing attention to myself. It felt unfair to be treated so differently as siblings, but I guess my parents saw her as someone who couldn't do much on her own and felt sorry for her. On the other hand, I've always been the type to do things quickly and efficiently. Maybe the adults didn't see much value in helping someone who could handle everything themselves. So, I became good at managing my sister's needs. Sometimes I would even pretend to be less capable in public to keep the balance. But as I grew out of my teenage years, I realized that continuing like this wasn't going to help me in the long run. I started pushing back against my parents and doing things my way. If I had kept going along with everything, I would have become someone who couldn't do anything. When I started standing up for myself, my sister didn't like it much because she was losing my support, but we never really had a bad relationship. We could still talk normally, and sometimes I even gave her advice when she had problems. Our family had its issues, like being too protective of my sister and a little bit of tension between us, but I still thought we were a pretty normal family. However, things changed when Paul didn't return my sister's feelings. She couldn't handle the fact that her younger sister was getting married before her. The night before my wedding, my sister blurted out to our parents, "I can't accept that my younger sister is getting married before me." My dad tried to calm her down, saying, "Don't worry, Laura. You'll find a good partner soon too." I agreed with him. "Yeah, Laura, it's not a big deal." But she wasn't having it. Normally, the older sister gets married first, then the younger one. It's too soon for her. "The wedding is tomorrow," I reminded her. "What are you talking about, Mom? Don't you care about me? I'll be the poor older sister who's left behind while her younger sister moves on," she cried. That night, I listened quietly from the hallway as my sister and our parents argued. Should my sister really get married first? If I waited for her to marry, I would end up growing much older, without any progress in my own life. What was she thinking? I hoped she would calm down after venting her frustrations. Then I heard something shocking. "We won't attend the wedding tomorrow, Laura. Please be okay with that," my father said. What? Both my parents agreed not to come to my wedding just to make my sister happy. I couldn't believe it. It was like they were under some spell, doing whatever she wanted. This went way beyond simply indulging her. Even then, my sister sighed, still not fully satisfied. "Fine, I'll compromise. Let her have a wedding that nobody acknowledges." It was clear she didn't want me to marry Paul, likely because she had feelings for him. It was unbelievable that my parents wouldn't attend my wedding because of my sister's jealousy. The day of my wedding came, but I barely slept the night before. Instead of excitement, I felt anxious and uncomfortable, constantly thinking about what had happened. I'll never forget the satisfied smile on my sister's face when my parents told her they wouldn't be there. At the venue, I had to explain to Paul and his parents why mine weren't coming. I apologized and said, "My sister doesn't support this marriage, so my family won't be attending." I told them it was heartbreaking to say that my own parents weren't coming to my wedding. My in-laws were shocked and couldn't believe there were parents who wouldn't attend their daughter's big day. After hearing my story, they stayed silent for a while. The mood felt so heavy, but then my mother-in-law gently took my hand, and my father-in-law placed his hand on top of ours. "Remember, your family is here with you. Don't let this day be a sad one. Come on. Why don't you smile?" my mother-in-law said warmly. Her words made me tear up. Paul, seeing me cry, softly stroked my head and said, "Ashley, I'm your husband now, so please stop saying that your family isn't here." My in-laws and Paul quickly tried to cheer me up, jokingly telling me not to cry because my makeup would smudge. Then, my mother-in-law looked at me with kindness and said, "Ashley, I know things are hard with your family back home, but this is the start of a new life. Let's build your own family together." Even though I felt abandoned, her words and her strong embrace gave me comfort. Paul and my father-in-law joined in with hugs, and I told myself that everything would be okay. Like my mother-in-law said, this was a new beginning. I promised myself that I would build my own happy family, and on that day, I officially married Paul. 18 years have passed since that day. In that time, Paul and I had a daughter and 3 sons. Our daughter is capable and looks after her 3 mischievous brothers, who sometimes turn the house upside down. I surprise even myself with how often I end up shouting, "Stop it now." Paul's career has been going well, we bought a house, and we've been living a stable life. But then, something unexpected happened. My father, mother, and sister showed up at our house. After the wedding, I had kept my distance from them and hadn't given them our new address. Yet somehow they found us and came unannounced. When they appeared, instead of a warm, long time no see, the first words out of my mouth were, "What do you want?" "I need a favor from you," my sister said. My parents added, "It's something only you can do for us," looking at me with serious expressions. I had no idea what they could possibly want after 18 years of silence. Half curious and half afraid, I wondered what was going on. I stayed quiet as my mom spoke up. "We want you to give Paul to your sister." "What?" Both Paul and I were stunned by her words. "Wait a minute, what do you mean I need to give Paul away?" I asked sharply. My parents both looked away, guilty, while my sister stood there, smug and proud. "She's still single, and she's turning 45 this year." "That's a problem," my father said. His words made no sense to me, and Paul looked just as confused. "Actually," my father continued, "the company she worked for recently went out of business, and she's unemployed now. It's tough. We're worried about her future, being single and without a job. We hope you understand. Since you're sisters, you should feel the same way." In my mind, I thought, no, I definitely don't think so, but I stayed silent, waiting to see what they would say next. I was getting frustrated with how slowly my father was speaking, but I held back from saying anything, eager to hear his point. "She's always liked Paul, and she's still alone because of it. You've had your time with him. Could you let her have him for the rest of her life?" "What?" Paul and I were speechless. My parents kept pleading, "Please," while my sister stood there confidently, certain she would get what she wanted. Given how my parents always catered to her, it made sense that she believed this, but the request was outrageous. As I put my head in my hands, Paul pulled me aside and whispered, "This could actually be a chance." "A chance? What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, remember that joke you made when you were drunk? It's like it's coming true," he said with a small grin. "Then, should we go with it?" I asked. We stood up and turned back to face my sister and parents. "Do you really love Paul that much?" I asked. My sister was caught off guard. She blinked in surprise and repeated, "Yes, yes. I've loved him all this time." "Wow, that's some serious love," I said. "You've been in love with him for 18 years, even though he's married to me?" "Yes," she said. "It's been so painful watching you and Paul together. It should have been me." Paul and I could barely hold back our laughter at her serious tone. I took a deep breath and said, "All right, I give up. If you love him that much, I'll step aside." My parents were shocked. My mom quickly asked, "Really? Don't you love Paul too?" "No, actually," I said, looking at Paul. "To be honest, I've always liked Laura." Paul played along, turning to my sister and saying, "Yeah, I've always liked her too." My sister's face lit up with joy. "Really?" she asked, her face flushed with excitement. "I knew it. You never resisted when I hugged you, and your eyes always looked so loving," my sister said, excitedly. "I've been waiting for this moment, and finally, it's here." I had to hold back my laughter, and I could see Paul pretending to cry, though his shoulders were shaking from trying not to laugh. We just needed to keep this up a little longer. "We'll always be together from now on, Paul," my sister suddenly said, acting as if they had been a couple all along. She was so casual about it, like she'd been living in this fantasy for the last 18 years. "Laura, I'm happy," Paul replied with a smile. "Please be my support from now on." "Yes, absolutely," she said, clearly thrilled. "So, I'm going to quit my job," Paul announced, grinning. My sister's smile faded in an instant, and her face turned to shock. "Really?" "Yeah, I want to be with you all the time, Laura. So I'm quitting my job to always stay by your side." "What?" she stammered, clearly not expecting this. "I won't even go outside anymore," Paul continued cheerfully. "I'll follow you everywhere. I'll even watch you do housework from behind." My sister froze for a moment, her panic setting in, while our parents looked visibly disturbed. "But I'm not working either. This is a problem," she muttered. "What's the problem? If we're together, we have nothing to fear. We don't need money to be happy," Paul replied. "But nowadays, we need to pay for things like insurance. It's not like the old days. We can't just live on love alone," she argued, her eyes starting to lose focus. Sensing the moment was right, I jumped in. "Paul, if we end up divorcing, I'll be taking a large share of the assets, so you better pay up." "Don't worry," Paul said with a laugh. "Your sister and parents will take care of everything." Hearing this, my parents turned pale and exchanged worried glances. "Laura," my father said, "this is hard to admit, but this isn't right." Stealing your sister's husband. It's wrong. Exactly, Laura, my mom added, suddenly backing away from the plan. It was as if all the passion and support for my sister vanished in an instant. What are you talking about? You promised Paul to me. Laura yelled, her frustration growing. That was before my father began, but she cut him off. I don't want to hear it. Doesn't anyone support me? Laura screamed, and in her frenzy, she grabbed my mom's hair. My father tried to calm her down, but it was chaos. In the middle of all this, Paul calmly spoke up. Laura, to be honest, you're not my type. I respect you as Ashley's sister, but that's it. Everyone fell silent, their attention now on him. I don't really want to interact much with you, especially when you look at me like that, Paul said. That gaze actually turns me off. Knowing that someone has unreturned feelings for me is really uncomfortable. His honest words left my sister and parents speechless. But Paul, what was all that earlier? My sister asked, clearly confused. Stop acting so casually with someone else's husband, I said firmly. There's no way he could fall for you. We have a family, and we're happy. As I said this, I stopped my sister, who was walking toward Paul with a pale face. You tricked me, she shouted. How could you think that someone who hasn't contacted you in 18 years still loves you? Isn't that a bit unrealistic? I asked. My sister's face turned red, and she started to tear up, clearly out of frustration. If you were really attractive, maybe it would be different. But no one finds charm in someone who is unemployed, dependent on their parents, and can't do basic things because their mom has always done them. At your age, a marriage wouldn't last long with those traits, I said plainly. Paul quietly chuckled behind me. My sister, hit by the truth of my words, began to cry loudly, unable to stop. Our parents tried to comfort her, but they looked confused, as if they were realizing that what I said was true. I'm not giving Paul to you, I continued. So please give up, Laura. At that, she cried even harder, like a child throwing a tantrum. It was a sad sight for an adult, and it was clear she hadn't matured. Take this as a lesson, and please don't involve yourself in our lives again, I said. No matter what trouble you face in the future, don't expect any help from us. With that, I slowly closed the front door. When my children asked what happened, I simply said, it's Halloween season, and it seems a ghost came early. My eldest suggested we exorcise the spirit, but I stopped the idea, though it did feel like there was a ghost wailing outside as my sister continued to cry. 6 years passed, and she's still single. She found a job but got fired for inappropriate behavior, and she caused trouble by rushing into a marriage that didn't work out. Now, she's banned from matchmaking events and seems likely to stay single for life. My parents, despite being tired, are still working part-time jobs to save money for her. They've probably realized they can't rely on her to take care of them in the future. Hopefully, they now understand the consequences of spoiling her all these years. I spend my days as a homemaker without having to worry about school fees for my kids, thanks to my smart children and my husband, who has a stable job. Sometimes, I wonder if working outside the home would help me burn off the extra calories I gained during the holiday season from eating too much. My daughter, who is already slim, is entering her growth phase and has been talking about wanting to go on a diet. I'm trying to convince her not to. You can think about dieting when you're older, like me, I tell her. My 3 sons love dancing and recently showed off their skills at a local event, where they won several awards. They proudly say, we're going to be in Pearl Jam one day. So, I really hope Pearl Jam stays together until they grow up. We regularly get visits from my in-laws, who are as dear to me as my own parents. We always enjoy delicious meals together. When the kids have their spring break, we plan to take a trip to a spa, and I'm excited about spending some quality time together. Although there were many challenges before marriage, my life since then has been filled with happiness. The bonds within our family have grown stronger, and I'm grateful for the love we share. I hope everyone stays healthy and lives long so we can continue to make precious memories together as a family.